Greetings, everyone. Koku here. We're about to start the show, but before we start the show, I want to give you guys a little heads up about what we're talking about tonight. So, the title of this paper is Toward Pan-African Media Workers' Unity by one David G. Du Bois. And this paper is going to take us through the absolute need for more Pan-African media, but particularly to have a unity across these borders of Pan-Africanism, right? It's going to talk about having a revolutionary media approach. It's going to talk about how organizations need to turn to Black media. And that's something I'm going to push heavy this upcoming New Roman year, is organizations need to put their efforts, right, where their mouth is. So that's something I'm going to be doing as well. The paper will talk about this. The paper will talk about we need to be pushing facts, not analysis. Just push facts. We need to be timely, and we need to have direct contacts. And that's something that I'm going to work on. And if you guys who are fans of this show and the other shows in the network, help us make those connections. We have to be the voices now. As Black media, we have to report what's going on as it happens. We need organizations who are doing certain works. We need to get that word out to help get them support as well. So we'll talk about those things in this paper. I appreciate you guys for being here. We'll talk about those things and more coming up.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. Before we get into this paper tonight, let's remind you guys that this show, the Bitter Medicine Podcast, is a part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows that you should be tuning into on the network.
This is W.E.B with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the Revolutionary Matron, on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes. So make sure you guys are tuning into all of those shows. The Harsh Reality Podcast earlier today, as a matter of fact, dropped a new Harsh Reality Podcast Presents, featuring our very own, the Revolutionary Matron from the Learning Curve Podcast. So you guys should tune into that as well, as soon as you have a chance. And make sure to check out the Pro-Black Perspective. Oh, and tomorrow night, there's a Twitter Spaces going on. The Harsh Reality Podcast will be hosting a Twitter Spaces. I think the topic in general is about African spirituality, if I'm not mistaken. So you guys should make sure follow us on Twitter, and you can be informed as to when we go live, when we have new content, new spaces, etc. So you guys make sure to follow us and tune in. And if you are following or subscribe to this channel here on YouTube, in the community tab, I will post the upcoming events as well. So you guys can check that out as well. In the chat, the Pro-Black Perspective is here saying Du Bois. Yeah, he's a Du Bois. The author is. The Learning Curve is here saying greetings. Greetings to the Revolutionary Matron. Tito District is here saying peace to everyone. So peace to all of you guys who are here live with me and in the playback. I appreciate all you guys. So yes, so let's talk about this paper tonight. And it's a short paper, so we shouldn't be here long at all. Toward Pan-African Media Workers' Unity by David G. Du Bois. The conspiracy of the establishment media to control the exchange of information between the Black Revolution in the U.S. and the African peoples must be exposed and circumvented. So, of course, this is an older paper, by the way. But the notion is still the same. And in fact, something I took stock of recently, I think I've heard the matron say it in a comment as well, is, we tend to repeat ourselves, to be honest. And the only reason why it's necessary to repeat what our elders and ancestors knew before is because, frankly, we haven't really done anything with what they said before. No matter how sound it was, how much of it, have we done? And so, we tend to still do the low-hanging fruit, low-energy stuff. We'll march in a circle. We'll take a lap. Call it protesting. But how much of the other things, right? Group economics, et cetera, have we done, right? And so it requires us to repeat ourselves. But the thing that we need to do as well is not just repeat, but to actually do. So that's the thing I'm looking at for this upcoming new year. So this paper is an older paper, but it still is the case. What this paper is talking about is still the case today. And so it has to be repeated, but more importantly, it has to be built upon. So let me start over. The conspiracy of the establishment media to control the exchange of information between the Black Revolution in the U.S. and the African peoples must be exposed and circumvented. This can be done despite the power and wealth of the establishment media on the one hand, and the many difficulties facing the Black Revolution and the African peoples on the other. Newspapers are of primary importance in providing news and news analysis on a regular basis. When properly edited, they are a vital means of political education and organization for wide sections of people. In most African countries, newspapers are passed from hand to hand, one paper being read by several people or families. Those who are literate traditionally read the papers to those who are not. Much faith is put in what appears in print. Therefore, the source of the newspaper's information is of vital importance. It is from the round-the-clock services of the Associated Press, or the AP, and the United Press International, UPI, in the United States, Reuters news agency in London, or Agence France Presse in Paris, that the majority of newspaper editors on the continent of Africa receive the bulk of their foreign news, including that of the Black Revolution in the U.S. It is from these same sources that the Black Revolution receives the great bulk of its news and analyses of the African Revolution. In no area of the media is the conspiracy more operative or more important than in the work of these quote-unquote international wire service agencies. Genuine revolutionary and people's movements and sentiments exist in rapidly growing strength in all of the non-revolutionary third world nations, among all its peoples. This is true because colonialism and/or neocolonialism, in collaboration with national reaction, still rules these nations and peoples. These movements exist and grow because they reflect, defend, and promote the most cherished aspirations, hopes, and desires of the depressed masses of farmers, workers, the illiterate, students, and honest upper strata of their societies. The bosses of the establishment media in the service of world imperialism know this and use the giant media machinery they have built to prevent the rest of us from knowing it. Consequently, where possible, revolutionary movements of the third world nations and peoples are kept ignorant of the existence, activities, ideologies, and victories of each other. They are deliberately misinformed about those activities and events that cannot be altogether ignored. And through the many highly developed tactics of slanting and misrepresentation, the establishment media attempts, often with temporary success, to turn such information as they do transmit into pro-imperialist, pro-neo-colonialist, and anti-revolutionary propaganda. When you listen to the episode earlier, the episode from the Harsh Reality podcast with the revolutionary matron, you'll hear them talking about the need for media, and you'll hear the matron succinctly add that, you know, we need to invest in propaganda and invest in the thinkers and have their voices put out there. And one of the things that I think is going on even right now, especially right now, as Tito District in the chat says, the update would be from print newspapers to social media, internet today. Absolutely. One of the problems is that on the internet, or the interwebs, or the internets, folks are getting this anti-African messaging all the time. They're getting anti-black man and anti-black woman messages. They're getting divest messages all the time. And this goes back to the shoot the breeze conversation that we had, the last prompt. It goes back to, you have to control the images. You have to control the information. You have to control the talking points, even, right? Within your populations, within your, hopefully within your own nations. You have to, everything has to be tailored, so to speak, towards self-determination, right, etc., right? You have to tailor, and this is why, in the recent past, we talked about, like, people talk about culture all the time, but culture is something you have to stitch together. You have to create. What is your culture going to be? What is your cultural product going to be? And so things like media and communication is all a part of that. The big problem I talk about in the past on this show is I don't have a tongue for, and this is important, I don't have a great tongue for pronouncing African words. I'll be the first to tell you that. Why is that, though? Because I'm not getting media from the continent on a regular basis that forces me to pick it up, right? And I would suppose that that's true for some of you listening as well. So if you don't understand this media thing and how this media drives propaganda and how this propaganda, negative propaganda, is used against you, then you need to catch up. Right? So one of the things I'm working on, and I've been working on, but I figured out a way to ramp it up now. One of the things I'm working on is getting these shows, right, these episodes, to more folks on the continent. Because I want more interaction, I want more information, more communication from folks on the continent with me. Right? If you have an organization out there that's especially a Pan-African organization that's looking to swim in new waters in the West, right? I would like to be that vehicle that you come to and you talk to. You know what I mean? And so this is why I'm doing this paper tonight. In the chat room, the learning curve says the past is the present until it is performed and perfected. That's well stated. Absolutely well stated. Arthur is here saying love and respect. Peace to you, Arthur. Thanks for coming through, right? So again, I appreciate Tito District pointing that out, that the update is social media and internet. And if you see other areas of update, point those out in the chat as well, because those who come along this video in the future will be better off for it, right? To continue. The obvious purpose of this effort is to promote and foster the lie within every indigenous revolutionary movement, many of which are small and weak, that it is alone and without allies. That it is alone and without allies. And a lot of folks don't get that. A lot of folks don't, and I know I probably shouldn't stop here, but if you think of your living, like I was talking to a sister the other day. I remember a popular grifter, won't call it his name today. Popular grifter was talking about was trying to shit on like Caribbean folks for living conditions or African folks for their living conditions. And I was talking to a sister from North Carolina who told me straight up, you go in some of these parts of like North Carolina, don't mind that they have the big research triangle and all that shit for research. She's like, yo, there's folks coming out of houses that you would never believe someone still lives in that house. And it's a holdover from back in the day when a lot of people lived that same way. Right? Why am I saying this? Because a lot of people think that the struggles that, and again, Malcolm X and all these guys, Kwame Ture, all these guys before me, long before me said this, right? That the struggles that you have in one place with African people is a similar struggle elsewhere with African people. But you won't know that based on the media. Listen, I've been to West Virginia. West Virginia ain't no poppin' place like that. You know what I'm saying? It's no popping place like that. But the media won't really point that out. This is why they have so many dope fiends out, white dope fiends out in West Virginia. The media won't point that out. Right? So the media is important to connect and to communicate with one another. What's going on in your neck of the woods? And oh, hey, that's what's going on in my neck of the woods. Oh, hey, this was the case for you 30 years ago, 20 years ago. What did you do to fix it? This is how you share these ideas and you uplift. Athrazer in the chat says we should have a media house like RT that has a coordinated effort. RT, what's RT again? Media house like RT. I can't think of what RT is, but you let me know, right? I mean, we are working towards it. And let me say this too. Media houses don't just spring up overnight. This is another thing that needs to be said. They don't just spring up overnight. These things take time and resources to get these things going. But if you don't do anything, then nothing will happen. Right? If you don't do anything, then nothing will happen. I can remember, I'm old enough. Okay. Tito, thanks for the clarification. I'm old enough to know that you take Fox, for example. Fox didn't just become what it is today, right? A media house for the right wingers, right? They didn't just become that today, right? They started off broad. Right? They started off broad, and over the years, they whittled themselves down to this niche that they have today. And that's something that we got to understand. Right? You might have to start a little bit broad, and this is why a lot of black media fails, actually. You can start off too specific. You got to start off broad, get a wide audience going, and then you start to put in, quote unquote, that propaganda, right? You start to sculpt your niche. You might lose some people, but because you start off broad, you have a lot of people that will still be retained. You understand? So I just wanted to drop that in there. for you guys, just to understand. So we're trying to build media here at KWAZ Radio. It will take time, but it needs efforts from everyone involved. It needs all of our efforts to make it turn into something. So let me read that again. The obvious purpose of this effort is to promote and foster the lie within every indigenous revolutionary movement, many of which are small and weak, that it is alone and without allies, that its efforts are doomed to failure, and that it is wasting its time. The second purpose is to strengthen the hand of indigenous reactionary leaders in their efforts to isolate and crush their revolutionary elements and maintain power. We've seen this enough times, right? Like we've seen, like in the Arab world, we've seen them shut down the internet, right? And we've also seen in different places where the internet was vital towards the revolution. The internet was left unchecked, and folks was able to communicate. In fact, I forget where it is, and I remember a couple of years ago there was a people group somewhere that used Twitter heavily. That might have been Egypt, but don't quote me on that, right? They use Twitter heavily. So it's important to know, because, again, this is how you communicate and compare notes. What works, what doesn't work, and you keep it moving. The fact is that African nations depend almost solely on the wire services of the Western capitalist countries for the immediate daily news of what's going on outside their own borders. The only exception to this is Egypt, whose Middle East news agency has wire service connections with the Arab countries and the Sudan and some European capitals. It has bureaus as far afield as New Delhi and Ceylon and London and Dakar. Right. This tells you a lot about Egypt today, too, by the way. Under colonialism, African countries were supplied with telecommunication facilities between themselves and the capital of the colonial power. Ghana with London, Algeria with Paris, Libya with Rome, Egypt with London, Kenya with London, Congo with Brussels, and Guinea with Paris, etc. The chief purpose of these links was the speedy transmission of commercial, stock market, and banking information, advice, and instructions back and forth to facilitate the exploitation of African people's riches. At the same time, as a press developed news, mainly economic and political, bearing on the particular natural resources or resources being exploited, was supplied from the capital for the local, i.e. colonial press, and quote-unquote African news of the same character was supplied to the capital for its press. The U.S. wire services were latecomers. After World War II, in collaboration with the already established Africa-Europe links, the Associated Press and the United Press International located permanent bureaus for the gathering and distribution of news in major African capitals. This was a situation when the African countries won or were granted their political independence. So you see how the hooks of colonialism was already in these folks? And in the main, it remains the situation today. The local African press, whether African-owned or foreign-owned, is accustomed to relying on and handling, first, the wire service material from the former colonial power, and secondly, that supplied by the two U.S. wire services. Individual African governments in their present stage of development cannot locate an army of foreign correspondents in the capitals of Africa. United States of Africa could happen. Most of these governments, lacking a revolutionary third world consciousness, and thus operating on cart before the horse priorities, argue that they cannot afford the costs. Quote, telegraphic services are expensive, doubly so to and from the African continent. The international wire services provide what we need. They maintain. They cap this argument with, quote, our primary concern is with our internal problems. Our press must place its emphasis here. Those African nations with a relatively recent indigenous press do not have the trained or experienced personnel for such assignments. They need every journalist they have or are likely to train soon at home. And those that have a relatively long tradition of an indigenous press, like Egypt, Nigeria, argue that the expense does not justify itself. Faced with mountainous problems left by colonialism and aggravated by neocolonialism, these nations find that they can easily fill the pages of their newspaper with national news. Foreign news, they assert, must have some direct relevance, otherwise there is no room. That's the thing too, right? There's always a cost structure to this stuff, right? And according to what this paper is saying, the leaders in a lot of these African countries will say, well, the cost structure is such that, number one, it's costly to get news from other African nations, right? And again, this was in the time when you're talking about wires, right? You're not talking about the internet per se, right? But you're talking about that wire system that they have of transmitting news and information. So they'll say it was a costly thing in terms of reporting news from neighboring African countries or countries also on the continent, right? And then they'll say, well, we had enough news going on in our country to fill up a newspaper. The problem with that is when you don't pay attention, there's a saying, when I was growing up, and I've talked about this in the show, but I'll repeat it again like I always do. There's a saying in the Caribbean period, there's a saying, if your neighbor's house is burning, check your house. And like I said on the show before, my grandmother lived that with us, If we were walking somewhere a couple of blocks from our house and there was a house burning in the area where we were walking, my grandmother will send you to run back to the house and make sure that our house ain't burning, right? The African countries, in a sense, either didn't understand or didn't care or somewhere in between, that the information that you were getting, that you could possibly get from other African nations dealing with colonialism or neocolonialism or apartheid or what have you, is vital information that you could have used. We got to start putting cost. I understand cost is important, but we got to kind of start putting cost as a barrier for our own selves, right? We have to figure out ways to work around these barriers to entry, so to speak, right? And it's the same thing today. It's just the same thing today. Let me tell y'all something. I've been talking to people on the continent, and just to talk to the right person, there's a cost. Just to talk to the right person, right? There is a cost to do that business, right? We have to find a way to minimize those costs as much as we can and not let cost be the thing that stops us from doing what we have to do. The more that we're in communication with our people, the better we all are for it. Right? I was looking at this brother Omawale, what's his brother name? Dwayne Wong today, and he's been like an organizer in Togo. And he talked about it some time ago on Twitter. I don't remember what he said exactly. But essentially, when he came into consciousness, one of the first problems he saw was the problem in Togo. And so that's where he put a lot of his Pan-African activist efforts, right? How many of you know what's going on in Togo? Right? I mean, what's really going on in Togo? Not just to say that they've been under military whatever for how long, right? But that's information that we could use, and there's probably information out here that folks in Togo could use, and so forth and so on. So we have to get behind black media, period. Right? You have to get behind black media, period, to continue. At the same time as I'm in the wrong place. So they said foreign news must have some direct relevance, otherwise there's no room. So then what's the point of news? Are we just reporting news just to know that some shit happened? Or are we supposed to be reporting news to learn the lessons of what happened elsewhere? And apply those lessons to our own situation? Which is it? You guys let me know in the chat room. Where is the African press going to receive news and analyses of the Black Revolution in the U.S. from the Associated Press and the United Press International? When there are major explosions, big news, Reuters in London and the Agence France Press in Paris, using reports of their correspondents in the U.S., may send out reports to those who use their services in Africa. Every line sent by AP and UPI from the U.S. to Africa on the Black Revolution is the result of very careful editing, calculated to do as little damage as possible to the U.S. image in Africa. Reuters generally follows the U.S. lead. The Agence France Press shows some independent courage on this score, but is limited by the demands placed on its correspondence in the U.S. and its distribution within Africa. It must be emphasized, however, that if it is not big news, that is, news that by its nature breaks through the establishment control, or if it is news of a victory, the African press is not likely to get it. So there's something that they say here that's important too. The image that they keep, again, that's the propaganda, right? So what happens with the U.S. image? I wish Ozuli was here to corroborate what I'm saying. That he and I once stood up talking to a guy from the continent. And this guy from the continent stood there and spewed all this bullshit about, blacks in America just bullshitting. No one's holding anyone down here. America is a great place, blah, blah, blah. And he's a young guy. Where'd he get that from? He grew up in his country seeing positive propaganda about the U.S. and seeing negative propaganda about Africans in the U.S. and internalized that and came to the U.S. with that in him. So when we get all this dummy stuff that we see, which again, in the social media of today, is the dummy stuff that's really going viral and that's really being pushed all the time. When we see some continental dummy say something like this Akata and blah, 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 right? Then that blows up. And now it's this tribal war of sorts between continentals and Africans in the West. But if it was a true, and we're going to talk about the truth part in a second, if it was a true media that was servicing Africa and the diaspora, the diaspora in Africa, right? We can do the editing if we chose to, or we could just report whatever is really going on and report it true and concise. You see, that's the problem that we have. So we have folks we have Africans, be them Africans in the UK or the Caribbean or the US, who already have this sentiment towards other African peoples based on the media. You know, the whole booty scratcher stuff back in the day, where did that come from? What was the whole African booty scratcher stuff? That came from something. And it wasn't something African. Tito District says they tried to shut down Twitter in Nigeria during the End SARS protest too, I think. Yes, they did. That's true. Right? Tito District says they have CNN and VOA on the major TV stations in a lot of African countries. That's detrimental to us. Thank you for that, Tito District. That's super detrimental. We can't be talking about trying to change anything on the continent or anywhere when you're being pumped full of this, because we talk about education all the time, but it's also this media stuff too. It's also the news reporting and what news goes where and how is it stated and all this stuff that we kind of don't pay attention to. You know? If you pay attention to the news, seeing that I have authors there in the chat, if you pay attention to the news, you probably wouldn't go to Jamaica. If you pay attention to the news, you probably wouldn't go to Guyana. You probably wouldn't go to Nigeria, et cetera, right? This is where you need to have your own media, and you need to be connected with other people who are pushing this idea of independent black media as well. To continue, we're almost done. Like I said, it's not a long show tonight, but I did wanna get this this thought across about black media today, right? No news about the Black Revolution in the U.S. is sent to Africa that hasn't been put through the establishment ringer, wrung out, and dried. So you could damn near topple America, and they won't really report that on the continent. You know, by the time they talk about it, they'll do what they did with like Vietnam. Right? A lot of people think the U.S. won Vietnam. You know. Newsmen and journalists of the African countries, among whom are some of the best brains and most devoted partisans for the Third World Revolution, are eager for any news of the Black Revolution in the U.S. They know it is in process of developing, and they know how vital its success is to the struggles of the peoples of Africa and the world for genuine and total independence and human progress. They know their readers devour such news. Many know how important it is for themselves and their readers to understand this aspect of the common struggle. Consequently, they want to place in their papers every scrap of information they can receive. But most workers in the media in African countries are not so stupid as to swallow whole the information and analysis on the Black Revolution attained through the establishment media. The result is that they try to sift the truth from the lies, the straight line from the slant, and throw out the analysis. I like how you wrote that. What appears in their press after this process of anything is an inevitably distorted fraction of what was received. There are those pressmen and editors on the continent who do not yet fully understand the utter lack of credibility of the U.S. wire services on the Black Revolution. These print the story as it comes, dropping the obvious analysis, but failing to do anything about the concealed analysis, the slanting, the distorted emphasis, the choice of words, etc. The African press has no source for complete, up-to-the-moment, accurate news and information of the Black Revolution in the U.S. What information it receives through U.S. newspapers and periodicals arrives too late to be considered news. By that time, its readers are hearing on shortwave transistor radio sets of some new development, which makes that of a week earlier dead news. No newspaper can publish dead news. There is no proliferation of weekly or monthly periodicals in the African countries, with the exception of Egypt, in which the accumulated materials could appear as informative and analytical articles. And even where such periodicals exist, the great bulk of the accumulated material on the Black Revolution is establishment produced. Quote unquote, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Newsweek, Time, etc., etc., etc. You know, I remember, this is how bad it is, right? When I'm old enough to remember when Grenada was attacked by the U.S. And I'm from a Caribbean country as well. And even we were getting the lion's share of the news on the U.S. invasion of Grenada. we were getting that from U.S. news sources, like the TV channel in my home country tapped into the news reporting of what was going on during the invasion, and that's what we got, right? So that means that we got a U.S. slant of what was going on. There's a lot of Caribbean people who think that the BBC is good news reporting. It might be better than the U.S., but that's some bullshit too, right? The learning curve says if you watch the news, you wouldn't go anywhere black. You sit in your house, masked, waiting for your subscription service, Abscene, or the Jabscene, or the vaccine inoculations, right? Yeah, you wouldn't do anything. The media is what, and this is what like guys like Neely Fuller and them kind of piggyback on too. Don't hang out with black folks unless you have an agenda. But shut up. Shut up. The pro-black perspective says, yeah, in Africa, BBC had me confused. I don't know why they had BBC, LOL. Yeah, a lot of black folks outside of America, right, believe in the BBC. You know, the what's that? The British Broadcasting Corporation, right? They ain't no better. They doing the same shit that everyone else is doing. Support independent black media is what I could tell you guys, right? To continue. On the other hand, those media workers in the black revolution in the U.S. are sympathetic to it, have almost solely the establishment wire service and media as their source for news, information, and analysis of day-to-day developments on the African continent. That army of establishment correspondents that swarms over Africa depends for its bread and butter on meeting the demands, prejudices, and interests of their editors in plush offices atop New York City skyscrapers. Even the attempt of some few to report honestly from the continent get twisted beyond recognition by these armchair editors. Periodically, there are indigent resignations of establishment correspondents in the field in protest against what a New York editor has done to his or her story. In far more cases, less courageous foreign correspondents shift from one newspaper to another, from one periodical to another, in search of an editor that will print what they write like they write it. If this is true for the general coverage of events and developments in Africa, how much truer it must be for the revolutionary developments in the continent. And that's nothing but a word right there, right? If they can't show you a positive image of on some mundane, like on some regular stuff, if they can't report that right, do you think they're gonna report, efforts, Black equals African efforts of getting this oppression up off of us? Imagine what the media wires would have said from 1791 to 1804 in Haiti. What would the media wires have said about what was going on there? Pro-Black Perspective says, yeah, Neely said he based his ideas off media. Yeah, you have to hold your head when you listen to that type of shit. Tito District says to the learning curve, exactly. They try to make predominantly black countries and cities seem unsafe. It's all propaganda. Look what happened recently with this Omicron stuff. BB Rodriguez sent me something today. I didn't get to fully look into it, but it's claiming that there's an 83% surge of C-19 on the continent or something like that, right? When they talk about their jobs and stuff, they go and they get some black PhD to go out there and smile and grin and get people to go do it. And like we've been saying here on some of the other shows on KWAZ Radio, where is the black folks who are doing that research, who can go to a black media apparatus and spread the word on what's really happening to black folks on the continent? When the pro-black perspective, when Onitase went to Ghana, everything I heard him say about how they dealt with the C-19 was glowing. But all of a sudden now there's these reports of this 83% spike, right? We can't be certain of anything that we're being told. And so what do we have to do? To counteract that, we have to have our own vehicles as best as we can, because again, we're in a situation, aren't we? We don't control the internet. We don't have our own internet lines or whatever it is running. We don't create a Wi-Fi. We don't have satellites up in the stars, right? So we are very much in a predicament. But with what we have, we can do something different. We can do something different, right? With what we have. And when they take away that, then we'll have to figure out something else to do. But this, what we're doing right now, sitting down, being spoon-fed the bullshit, and we just accept it, no bueno. No good at all. Continue. It is essential that media workers in and close to the Black Revolution in the U.S. develop ways and means of regular exchange of information with African media workers in every category, including freedom fighters and militant revolutionaries. 10 years working in the media in Egypt and for a time in Ghana has made me acutely aware of this need from the African continent's point of view. A growing awareness of the ignorance, misconceptions, and distortions about Africa rampant among Black revolutionaries in the U.S., revealed as I encounter them here on the continent, reinforce my awareness of this need from the point of view of my native land. In the pursuit of this search, the following considerations should be kept in mind. So let's talk about these considerations. Number one. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, let me do a station ID break here. And on the other side, we'll talk about these considerations that he has.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is W.E.B with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio. Have you ever considered joining KWAZ Radio? Each of our hosts shares their unique perspective with you. You might have a perspective that needs to be shared. If that's true, hit us up at kwaz.radio@gmail.com. What are you gonna do? What you gonna do?
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I just wanted to jump on real quick and highlight a tweet made by the revolutionary matron of the Learning Curve podcast on KWAZ Radio. She says in this tweet, "Buy black and support KWAZ Radio hosts. Buy a t-shirt today. You can go to t-shirtepiphanies.com/KWAZ-radio-merch. You can support all the hosts like Onitase from the Pro-Black Perspective, myself, Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, the Harsh Reality Podcast with W.E.B and L. Miguel, and last but not least, the Revolutionary Matron from the Learning Curve Podcast. And I just wanted to show you, also, you can look at and see some of the first shirts that we have here. We have a lot of size options for you guys to choose from. So make sure go ahead and support each of these shows by purchasing a t-shirt today. The reality is that when you buy merchandise, support of one of your favorite shows on the network, you help to make that show even better, right? And by purchasing and wearing these t-shirts, you are showing people around you that you are included in the culture that we are creating at KWAZ Radio. All right? Buy it because you love what we're doing. Buy a t-shirt because you want to be a part of this thing that we're creating, right? And buy it because you want to show people that you feel united with the subject and the cause of the shows on KWAZ Radio. I'm Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast. You guys be good. Peace.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I always appreciate when you guys tune in. That last spot was about the merch store. It's holiday season. Whether you deal in their holiday stuff too tough or not, but it's end of the year. It's the beginning of a new Roman year. If you're going to be purchasing anything, why not purchase a t-shirt or a mug from one of or all of your favorite shows on KWAZ Radio. In the chat, I see that the Learning Curve said they have economically cut off many of the Eurasians, so now they are surging. She's talking about why the C-19 is going up all of a sudden on the continent. Learning Curve says, to Tito District, I agree, we need to talk to each other. I would love updates from the people, not from the establishment media. Absolutely. Bobby E. Wright is here, y'all. Y'all say what's up to Bobby E. Wright. He says, there's a sister named Tierney Pepra who has, oh yeah, I know who you're talking about, who has created her own channel called African Esquire TV. I think Oni and them might somewhat be kind of tied into her. I've seen some posts and stuff from her, but I'm not really tied in too much. He says, African Esquire TV, she's a Pan-African Black first sister. She reports accurate news from the continent. Now we need to multiply that. And by the way, Bobby E. Wright just reminded me of something too. Did I talk about that? We gotta, there's something that Onita Say said before too. You're smart, I'm smart, we're all smart. Can we work together? And one of the problems I have with other folks who are doing, say, similar things or, like-minded things in the same vein, is you approach them to work together on something and no one wants to work together. That's a big problem we have in Black society. I mean, it's a human problem, but it's a big problem for us because we really need to work together. If you look up the history of some of these networks in the US, there was a time when, little individuals owned a little radio station in many of these small towns across the US and stuff like that. And someone who I imagine had some paper, decided, let me go and organize these little stations, right, to become the news portal for the people in these little locations, and they have a common theme behind them. That's how you get stuff like NPR, right? The little guy, he can go into a little radio station in his area, and he can do a show. She can do a show, right? And now with the internet, if you peeped it, NPR has been around like 50 years. They really blew up with the internet. The internet made them huge, especially like Sirius FM and all that, made them huge. I know people who will tell you right now that NPR was the soundtrack, so to speak, of their life. Back in college or whatever, you know. We gotta start being able to understand how you work together, right? Your audience, it might not be my audience, but by the time we're done working together, now we both share an audience. We both have a bigger audience now. We can do more. We have more reach. We got to start thinking in those ways. Tito District says, to the learning curve, more open dialogue will definitely help clarify what life is like for our people in other parts of the globe. Absolutely. Right? Thank you for that, Bobby E. Wright and Tito District, and for all you guys who've been commenting. Thank you for that. Tito District says to Bobby E. Wright, she has a really good channel talking about Tierney or African Esquire. Right? All of these things are important. And again, none of these ideas are particularly new. Yet here we are talking about it again. Right? And we're talking about it. Why? Like I said at the top of the show, we're talking about it because nothing has really been done. More people are getting into this aspect of like independent black media, but on what level? You know, and so I want to shout out the other folks, brothers and sisters on KWAZ Radio. You guys are actually doing it. You know, let's hope that in this upcoming new Roman year we can get more folks to join. So, this author Du Bois said in his pursuit, in the pursuit of this search, the following considerations should be kept. Right. So he is going to give us some pointers here. He says, number one, it is we who determine what is important news and information for transmission, not the establishment media. Everything a revolutionary body is doing that can be revealed without a threat to security, I like that, is important. Right? Of course, you won't go there and spill all the beans. Right? You won't go there and spill all the beans, but let us have an idea. What's going on? What's the little changes that you made, and how much change is it affecting? Right? I like that. Number two, emphasis must be placed on facts, not analysis. Give the brothers who are engaged in basically the same struggle the facts, and they can make their own analysis. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, you had the same problem I had 20 years ago. What did y'all do? How did y'all change your situation? And then we will sit down and figure it out. Right? We will sit down and put it together and apply it to our somewhat unique situation. I say somewhat unique because if we're in different locations, then it's somewhat unique, right? Different geographic locations, etc. Right? So that's sensible. I like these first 2 points so far. What about you guys? Right? How do you feel about the first 2 points? Would you add anything to point number one or point number two? You can put that in the chat or down in the comment section, right? And we can have a dialogue after the show about it, even in the comment section. Number three, anticipate explosive developments and provide that information as it happens. That is, leading up to the explosion. We don't really have that. When all that NSARS and the stuff that went down back in the day in Darfur, right? We had to hear that shit through the establishment news agencies. And then we had to play catch up. Okay, well, what the hell happened here? Boko Haram takes 150 girls. I still don't know if that's really true. You have to play catch up to figure out, well, what's going on? What led to this happening? And let me tell you what happens when that's done. Let me tell you what happens. A lot of people lose interest. if a story, it's like you come in and to a TV show and it's already 3/4 of the way through, you're not trying to sit down there and figure out what the fuck happened. You walk away and go do something else. So what happens with a lot of our people, because we're reactionary, because we're getting this information after the fact, a lot of our people will be like, I'm not even bothering with Boko Haram. Okay, whatever. Whatever. Right? So anticipate explosive developments and provide that information as it happens. That is, leading up to the explosion. Explosive events must be carried by the establishment media. If we've provided the background as it happens, the establishment media's lies and distortions can be exposed, and that's super important. That's super important. You want to go, some shit happens in Nigeria, but if you had your people reporting to, letting us know in the West what's going on, there's some events happening here. This could lead to this could lead to an explosion of sorts, right? Then when CNN, the BBC, and all these folks come and talk their bullshit, we would have already understood what was going on and how this thing happened. And importantly, and this was important for our generations coming, is to point out the nonsense. Nah, that's not how that went down. Right? Number 4, direct contact between editors and media workers must be established and maintained. I mean, that just makes sense. There's nothing else to add there. Number 5, imaginative ways of overcoming the problem of speed in transmitting information must be found. Well, lucky for us, right? Now, I don't know how much high-speed data transmission, because I saw a brother say something the other day that Africans on the continent, because of data restrictions, might not be able to watch like a full YouTube video. It might be better as an audio file that you drop off in like a Google Drive or something, right? So that's something we'll have to figure out. But again, listen, being where I'm from, people, and not just people from where I'm from or the area I'm from, just saying though, we're big on WhatsApp. We're big on WhatsApp. Man's is sending voice notes back and forth. I was in contact with a guy in the UK the other day, another guy in Sierra Leone the other day, all voice notes, WhatsApp. So it's not impossible to have instantaneous reporting in this day and age. Our problem is we don't control the services. And so if someone really wants to, they could shut that shit down. Look what happened to, what was it, Facebook in the summertime, I think it was. Facebook was down. I think Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram were all down for a minute. You know, they could shut their own shit down if they want to, much less some shit that we're doing on their platforms. But we gotta use what we have, and then we gotta figure out innovative ways like the author suggests in the future. Right? So you guys have those 5 suggestions. What say you to the 5 suggestions? I'll read them live before I log off tonight, as I'm at the end of the paper now. A creative, revolutionary approach must be taken by media workers in the States and in Africa, separately and jointly, in order to overcome this problem of communication. Every organization or group, no matter how small, no matter what its particular area of struggle, and no matter how limited its resources, that claims revolutionary consciousness must turn some measure of attention to this problem. Amen to that. If this is done, the conspiracy I have in brief described above can be defeated, and our ultimate victory brought nearer. And that's what I want to focus on personally. A bit more in the future. That's what I want to focus on a bit more in the future. It's criminal. It's criminal that there's organizations in whatever city you're in where there's black folks, there's probably an organization or two or three or more. And you don't know what's going on with none of them. Or you're in one, you know what's going on in that organization, but you don't know what the hell else is going on. And that's been the case. This is nothing new. I was in organizations back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I can tell you, you'll go to an organization meeting and see some of the same folks from another meeting and still wouldn't know what the other organization is doing, what they're up to, right? That has to change. That has to change. Tito District says 1,000% agree with points 1, 3, 4, and 5, but I think we do need to infuse some analysis in our reporting on point number 2. So news is supposed to be unbiased, right? It's supposed to just be what happened. This is what happened, right? Unless you want to change that definition, that's fine by me. I think I understand what the brother's trying to say is that because by analyses, a part of analyses is actually editing, right? If you run analysis of data in Excel, part of what you're doing is editing the data, right? And I think that's the thing that we want to avoid because we don't want to leave stuff out. We don't want to leave anything to interpretation, right? So report what happened, right? So for example, you're the Mau Mau and you overcame what you overcame. Let me know what you did. Let me know in general what happened, again, because you don't want to spill all the beans into the public. Let me know what you did. Let me know what happened as best as you can without giving away everything, right? Which is another part of the problem with the analysis. The analysis could actually give away everything, right? Let me know what you did. We'll take that information and we'll apply it as we see fit, as necessary or as possible to our situation. The learning curve says Amazon went down recently. I didn't even know that. Amazon going down even took down some government services. Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know it went down, but I'm not surprised by the government services because a lot of big companies with a lot of data, remember big data is a big thing these days, and Amazon has the ability to store a lot of data, right? And so if they go down, a lot of your stored information and stuff will go down with it. So I didn't know they went down, but I'm not surprised how big government services suffered as well. Tito District says, the learning curve, I remember when that happened. It also goes to show that their systems are not impenetrable. That's absolutely true as well, right? We got to use what we can, and if they could crash their own shit, they could crash our shit. No doubt about it. But we got to use what we can while we can. Right? Again, I ask you guys, it's a bit of a rhetorical question. You could talk to yourself about it. What would the news reporting have been around 1804? I want to thank you guys for coming through tonight. Thank you all for the comments, etc. And I hope you guys think about what I'm talking about here. Support independent black media. Do whatever it is you can to support. We got to be serious about this stuff now, right? We got to be serious about this stuff now. I'll be back on Saturday for Saturday Night Shoot the Breeze. You guys can post your prompts on the Discord. I'll discuss the first 10 that I see on Saturday Night Shoot the Breeze. Don't forget tomorrow night. In fact, make sure you click the bell on this channel to get all notifications when I post on the community tab tomorrow or later tonight. I'll let you know specifically what's being discussed tomorrow night on Twitter Spaces. Posted by the Harsh Reality Podcast's W.E.B. And I hope you guys join. We're trying to gain momentum in this Twitter Space thing. Hope you guys join in with the discussion. All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow night in the spaces. I'll see you Saturday night for the shoot debris. You guys be good, and peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.